Now, in the off-season overview videos, I'm up to Philadelphia, and I understand yesterday, I want to just go ahead and say I did overlook that Kalyn Addison was traded out during the season to Minnesota, so he's Minnesota property, and which highlights, again, the problem for Pittsburgh, which is that they don't have enough of the top-notch, I'm talking like the top-notch prospects. Now, Philadelphia, they've got some prospects. They've got some guys who come into the lineup. They've also got some guys in the minors who may come up who don't qualify as rookies next year. So there are a couple of guys who may very well play next year and have been in the middle. I'm thinking like Vorobiev, but again, it's the fact that he has played too many games now to be considered a rookie next season. So Philadelphia is an interesting team. At the time of the overall shutdown of the league, they looked like they were on a mission. They were a machine. This was the most impressive I had seen the Philadelphia Flyers since the Eric Lindros era, since the Legion of Doom line, when it looked like they were going to a Stanley Cup in the mid-90s. And really, in all honesty, I don't see any reason Philadelphia can't keep it up. One of the big question marks for Philadelphia coming into this season was, is Hart going to be the starter now? Does he need more time? Is he going to be impressive? And while his overall numbers are middling, when you look at the starters in the league, he played very well. So Hart has kind of proven, yes, he's ready. He's the starter, and it's that big question mark that Philadelphia's had hanging over the franchise really since the heyday of Ron Hextall. And they've needed the stability that they haven't had, thus the firing of GM Ron Hextall last year. So Hextall, maybe his firing as a GM's brought them more stability after. I don't know. But part of the reason that he was let go was apparently rumored to be that he wanted to keep Hart in the minors. There were other reasons, but one of the reasons was he didn't feel that Hart should come up, and then he did, and he played pretty darn well after he left. So for the Flyers, there's a lot of good things that have been happening for them over the last, I'll say, 6 or 7 months. And there's no reason to think that once we get this ball rolling again, that they won't still be a pretty darn good team. UFAs this summer to deal with would be Nate Thompson. Tyler Pitlick is another one. Derek Grant is another one. Grant, it should be interesting to see what they do with him. I like Grant a lot, so I'm really kind of hoping he does go UFA and he ends up on a team that I cheer for as one of my top 3. I don't care which one. He'd be an excellent addition. Although, being from Abbotsford, if he played in Vancouver, that'd be handy. Justin Braun, another one who's going UFA in all likelihood. They don't have a ton of cap space. They have some, and I would think they're going to want to be as smart with that cap space as possible, because eventually Carter Hart's going to need a bit of a raise, and you're going to want to make sure you've got the money to sign him long term. Brian Elliott's UFA this summer played okay this year. I don't think he's played well enough to warrant keeping around for a big contract or anything, and I would imagine they look in another direction. Now, Alex Lyon has been borderline for the last few years. Do you give Lyon a shot at the backup job finally, or do you move on and look in another direction? That's a question that the Philadelphia Flyers will need to answer this summer. Restricted free agents, things get a little bit dicier with the restricted free agents. You got Obey Kubel, who's got arbitration rights. Obey Kubel had a pretty darn good season. Now, the offensive numbers aren't great, because he doesn't score a bunch, but he plays very well, you got to think he'll get a pretty decent bridge, like 2-year contract. I don't think it'll be a big money thing, but they're already at $69.5 million spent for next year. Haig's out there as well, arbitration rights, restricted free agent. I'll be interested to see what he gets. Philippe Myers is going to make some money. And so again, the amount of money they're going to have to re-sign any of these guys, it becomes harder and harder to find. And Nolan Patrick. Now, Nolan Patrick, of course, has been struggling to get healthy, stay healthy for a long time. And we're at a stage, I think, with Patrick where the question becomes one of, okay, is he going to continue his career? Are we looking at a player who's going to have a painfully short career? And or are we looking at a guy who might play 40 games a year at best, and maybe he's never that healthy? But he's an RFA this summer, and I would think Philadelphia sits down and works out again. I would think a 2-year contract, probably not for a lot more than what he gets right now. So again, it's not something that should be prohibitive to their cap space. And you could argue that based on his numbers, he should get a little bit of a raise. But again, with the health issue hanging over things, I don't know how much more you give him. Now, Lindblom. Oscar Lindblom. Restricted free agent, arbitration rights this summer. And of course, when he went down, there were a lot of Flyers fans that said, well, there goes our goal scoring, because at the time, he was playing very, very well. And so as he goes through his treatments and he goes through the process of trying to get back into the NHL, what is he worth? And that's a question mark for a general manager that I'm glad I don't have to answer, because Lindblom was playing really, really well, and you don't want to lowball the guy, because if it gets out to Philadelphia fans that you lowballed Lindblom with what he's going through, right? So this is something that you have to take it kind of easy. You have to sit down with the agent. You have to come up with some kind of a number that works. And again, I'm thinking not necessarily a huge long-term contract, although Philly's known for those. I would think probably a bridge contract as well. So I don't see anything in their contracts to tell me that Philadelphia has a big problem coming up, which after the Kevin Hayes contract, we might have said, hey, they're going to have a problem. But they really don't, not yet. Now, over the last 3 seasons, they were 41, 21, and 7 with 89 points at the stoppage. 2018-2019, 37, 37, and 8 with 82 points. So they missed the playoffs the year before they made the playoffs, because this is kind of what they do. 42, 26, and 14 record, 98 points, and they were out in round 1 in 2018. So it's in the playoffs, out of the playoffs, in the playoffs, out of the playoffs. For Philadelphia, now that they looked like a playoff team that could threaten to be first in the, at least in their division, now that they've shown that, now they have to make sure they don't have a fallback next year. But I have to say, that shouldn't happen. You have to think Ghost will have some kind of a bounce back year next year. And they already had a pretty good blue line with Provorov taking that next step. So maybe we'll see them find a way to keep Braun. Maybe we'll see them find a way to move some money around so that they don't have to worry about losing any players. And it's going to be interesting. Now, for their best contract, I went with Couturier. $4.33 million for 2 more years. He will get a large raise at the end of that. Sean Couturier, one of the best two-way forwards in the game. And once Bergeron eventually slows down, you have to think eventually it's going to happen, although this really long break should help him prolong things. But once Bergeron is no longer the obvious pick as Selke winner, Couturier has to be one of the prohibitive picks. He has to be one of the top picks for the Selke. He is just that good at both ends of the rink. Worst contract? You know what? I'm going to say this. We all talked about the Hayes contract last year. I don't have a problem with the Hayes contract for what he's done for Philadelphia. And I mentioned this recently as well. The Hayes contract at $7+ million would have been terrible for the Winnipeg Jets. Would have been terrible if Vancouver had signed him to that. Would have been terrible a lot of places. It is not terrible for Philadelphia. So while I can agree that is a large amount of money for Hayes, for Philadelphia, for what he's done for Philadelphia, for the stability he's given that top 6, I can't argue with the results. He's been really, really good for them. So I went with Voracek in that his numbers this year weren't fantastic, and at $8.25 million for 4 more years, I do wonder if Voracek's going to be the odd man out. If when Seattle comes in, they find a way to, I don't know, hold on to some money and give Voracek off to Seattle for where they retain maybe 25% and something like that, right? Because they're going to need to pay Carter Hart. They're going to need to keep this core together. And it does to me look like Voracek might end up being the guy who's the odd man out. It won't be Hayes. We know it won't be Hayes. And we know it won't be Giroux because he's kind of Mr. Flyer. Now, like I said, $69.5 million spent for next season already. So there's limited money there to get things going. And in part thanks to Couturier being at $4.3 million. If he was getting what he was worth on the market, you've got to think that'd be $8 million. And that'd be $3.5 million less that they'd have to spend for next year. Rookie watch, Morgan Frost. Depending on who you ask, I've seen Philadelphia fans say he should have had more ice time, he should have had more of a chance, and I've seen Philly fans say he looked lost out there. So next year we'll see what happens with him. German Rubtsov, not fantastic numbers overall, but you know what? He's still young. They may find a 4th-line role for him. He played a handful of games for them this year, so he's still on their radar on some level. We'll see whether or not he gets into the lineup regularly next year, depending on who comes back out of this group. Carson Twarynski. Twarynski, the offense isn't his deal, but the hard work is. And so while he only had the 1 point, and I think it was 15 games for them this year, he still qualifies as a rookie next year. And I like the work ethic. So Twarynski, I think will get a shot at a 4th-line role next year, probably right out of training camp. and we'll see how that turns out. And I've got Mark Friedman on there. Friedman had a decent enough call-up. I think it was 6 games worth. He's still a rookie next year, and we'll see if he plays a large or small role on that blue line. You got to think number 7, in all likelihood, on their defense chart. But Philly's defense is really unpredictable in the overall scheme of things. You look at Ghost again as a good example of really unpredictable career, where he's great one year and the next year he looks kind of lost, and then we'll see a bounce back, I would think, with him. But Philadelphia looks pretty good going forward. I like what Philadelphia has done, and they might end up being a sexy pick for a 2021 Stanley Cup. They could end up being a sexy pick. They haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1975. They're well overdue, and maybe it's their turn in 2021. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. It means a lot. Do stay safe. Stay home when you can. We'll talk to you guys again soon.